In this video, we will present our technique on an arthroscopic medial meniscus allograft transplantation with retensionable suture fixation and the use of a centralization stabilization suture. These are our disclosures.
Here is a prepared medial meniscal transplant with the special blue number 2 fibroid suture passed in a baseball fashion through the peripheral aspect of the meniscus for stabilization purposes. I leave a bit of bone attached to the posterior horn to enhance healing and extra soft tissue attached to the anterior horn for suturing purposes that you'll see later on. Again, this suture slides. So I use the point-to-point root guide for my posterior fixation of the root anatomically, 2.4 millimeter cannulated pin. I remove the cannulation and pass a wire. Use this wire to bring 2 fiber-link sutures through the posterior horn hole, one for the passage of the posterior stabilization suture, the other for my posterior suture lock. Here's the posterior suture lock being delivered. Once the white loop passes beneath the medial tibial plateau, I pull back on the sutures, and my right hand and my left hand is in the black and blue loop to set the suture lock for my aperture fixation. Then it's important to clamp the suture lock on the tibia to protect the pull sutures, which will be necessary for my later suturing. Then I do the same thing anteriorly with the point-to-point guide for my anterior horn attachment. I pass my anterior suture lock here. Same way, once that white loop disappears underneath the plateau anteriorly, I pull back on my right hand, which is where the sutures are located, my left hand on the black and blue suture to set for my aperture fixation here anteriorly. Another advantage of this technique is I can suture my roots outside the joint. I place the meniscus on a blue towel. I first take the posterior suture lock blue repair suture and pass it in a mattress fashion through the posterior horn, avoiding my stabilization suture. Once I make that passage of the horizontal mattress suture here, I go back into the joint and retrieve the corresponding blue and white loop suture along with the repair suture to avoid a soft tissue bridge. That blue and white loop suture will help me create my splice for my knotless fixation. Pass the repair suture to the blue methylene blue mark, unclamp it on the tibia, and take the blue pull suture, create my splice, tighten it down part way. Then I take my white repair suture from the posterior suture lock, pass it behind the blue horizontal mattress suture to create a ripstop for a Mason Allen configuration, which has been shown to be the strongest fixation for the root. Use the black and white loop suture, create my splice with the white pull suture on the tibial side. Another advantage of this technique is the suture lock helps deliver the meniscus so it doesn't flip on you. Pull the blue and white sutures part way to bring the meniscus posteriorly. Now I'm going to take the posterior stabilization suture with the other fiber-link suture I passed initially. This suture helps to further stabilize the posterior attachment to the plateau, but also, again, when matched with the anterior stabilization suture, will keep the meniscus centralized prior to my final suturing. Anteriorly, I have extra soft tissue attached here to the root. I pass the blue suture first, get the blue and white loop suture, fold the repair suture, the methylene blue, and then the blue pull suture on the tibial side as seen here. Tighten it down part way. Then I'll take the white repair suture from the anterior suture lock, do the same thing. I use simple sutures anteriorly because I believe the vascularity is very good here for healing. So simple sutures suffice. Bring out the black and white loop suture, create my splice, fold it over to the blue, methylene blue mark as seen here. For the repair, the white pull suture on the tibial side. Tighten it down part way, and again, the suture lock will help deliver the meniscus into the joint without it flipping. I cut off this extra tissue, deliver the meniscus, pull the blue and white sutures about 80% of the way from initial reduction. Then I will take the other fiber link anteriorly and use this to pass the anterior stabilization suture as seen here. Pull it on the tibia. Next step is to fix the anterior and posterior horn stabilization sutures, which is done with a 4.75 millimeter biocomposite Slovak anchor here. And that stabilizes the meniscus on the plateau. Next, I will complete my tightening of the posterior and anterior horn roots with tensioning ability here with the knotless mechanisms for the 2 blue and white repair sutures correspondingly. Once they're tight, I cut the suture locks on the tibia. Now I'll finish my suturing, but again, the meniscus is first stabilized because of those 2 stabilization sutures. I place a couple of all-inside fiber stitch vertical mattress sutures in the posterior horn, avoiding the stabilization suture. Anteriorly, I'll utilize an inside-out zone navigator device and place sutures in the mid and anterior horn, tie those to the capsule. But I really believe the advantage of this technique is because I have stabilized the meniscus first to the tibia, I actually bring the capsule to the meniscus and not vice versa to avoid extruding the meniscus at time 0. Place the knee through a range of motion. You can see it's nice and secure on the plateau, no extrusion, very stable construct.